Look at these images. A Russian-modified armored vehicle with mine rollers. Once a symbol of protection, now a burned shell of what it used to be, destroyed in the sub-Sahel. Here we have €100,000, stolen in late May of 2025 on the outskirts of Bamako, and footage of an attack along the Burkina Faso-Benin border area, demonstrating relentless violence. These are not isolated events. For the past few years, militant movements and terrorist organizations have been on a meteoric rise in West Africa, and now the region is more politically fractured than ever. At the forefront of this escalating crisis is Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, or JNIM. JNIM is an alliance network of salafi-jihadist insurgent groups with deep roots in the Sahel. They are rapidly expanding their presence, reaching the very doorstep of the Ivory Coast. But this expansion isn't solely through conventional warfare. JNIM is fundamentally a strategic criminal actor that masterfully leverages illicit economies to fund its sustained campaign of violence. And now that the region is divided by political infighting and coups, JNIM is primed to continue its terrifying rise. To understand JNIM, we must first trace its lineage to the Algerian Civil War of the 1990s. This era saw the emergence of the Salafist Group for Preaching and Combat, or GSPC, which later rebranded itself as Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, AQIM, in January of 2007. AQIM quickly established financial networks spanning across North and West Africa from Morocco to Nigeria. AQIM, the largest partner of JNIM's four groups, initially focused on undermining regional governance and fostering Islamic governance. Historically, AQIM derives significant funding from kidnapping for ransom and the illicit cigarette and drug trade, utilizing the Sahara's extensive smuggling network. This early engagement in criminal economy laid the blueprint for JNIM's financing. Although little is known of JNIM's leader and deputy leader, Iyad Ag-Ghali and Amadou Koufa, what's apparent is their influence over the alliance network. Since JNIM formed in 2017, the group's mid-ranking officers each had significant autonomy over their area of governance. But they do work together by exchanging tactics and coordinating attacks. Although jihadist violence was most commonly found in the Sahel, it also emerged in Burkina Faso after President Blaise Compaoré's ousting in 2014 created a power vacuum that extremist groups were quickly able to exploit. This period saw the formation of Ansarul Islam, a group that initially focused on addressing perceived class injustices and appealed to marginalized Fulani communities. JNIM marked its initial expansion in Burkina Faso in 2017 through the absorption of Ansarul Islam. From its inception in March of 2017 to late 2023, JNIM has aggressively expanded its operational territory from its traditional stronghold in northern and central Mali into western and southern Mali, most of Burkina Faso, parts of Niger, and even the northernmost areas in Benin, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Togo. But violence didn't start exploding in Burkina Faso until 2019, when conflict incidents with JNIM rose from 253 incidents in 2018 to 646 incidents in 2019, and deaths related to those incidents grew 7 times in that period. A further doubling of the conflict incidents occurred between 2020 and 2021, rising from 643 incidents to 1,773 incidents. And this conflict is not regionalized. JNIM is said to have significant influence in over 11 of Burkina Faso's 13 provinces. But what does that influence look like? At its core, JNIM adheres to a strict Salafi-jihadist interpretation of Islamic law. Their stated goal is clear: to expel all Western forces, whether it be the French military, UN peacekeepers, or the Wagner Group, and establish an Islamic emirate governed by Sharia law. In short, if you were not with JNIM, you were against them, and this ideology fueled their relentless campaign of violence. JNIM governs conquered territory by employing a big tent Islamist approach, designed to attract and integrate diverse ethnic groups across the Sahel, including Tuareg, Arab, Fulani, Songhai, Bambara, Dongo, and many others. They skillfully co-opt local grievances and reshape them into the wider Salafi-jihadist worldview. How they do this is by looking to see which communities are feeling the pain of a particular regime and that also adhere to similar brands of Islam to JNIM. In the case of Burkina Faso, it was the majority Fulani group of Ansar al-Islam. JNIM will then help that community by providing supplies, services, and aid, as seen here where its members are helping flooded communities cross a river. By doing this, militants integrate themselves into that community and gain their trust. All while these steps are going on, militants will argue that both they and the smaller group they are trying to have join them have the same enemy, France, Wagner, or any other regional or state government. Groups who align themselves with JNIM often get better services, like medical facilities, food, cheap fuel, an effective Islamic-based judicial system, and less violence overall. And communities that join JNIM without conflict often get more autonomy from some of the militants' most orthodox Islamic practices. Once the community joins the jihad, then JNIM repeats the process with the next community. And if any community decides not to join, then the militants will use more forcible means to either subjugate or destroy them. Despite this goodwill, JNIM still uses coercive methods to force communities into submission, such as controlling the flow of information between communities aligned with JNIM and those who are not, by capturing telecommunications infrastructure and blowing up cell towers to completely block the flow of information. Though telecommunications infrastructure is a common target, it is not the only target. Military and security facilities, government buildings, schools, and bridges are also regular targets for JNIM. Irregular checkpoints are often set up by JNIM for intelligence gathering, identity checks, and resource extraction, often looting vehicles and motorcycles. JNIM also uses these checkpoints to place embargoes and blockades on non-compliant towns and villages, such as in Mali's central region of Bandiagara and Burkina Faso's southeastern province of Kopenya, to starve communities into submission. JNIM has also conducted targeted assassinations, kidnappings, complex attacks, and large-scale military campaigns in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and some smaller-scale border raids into the Ivory Coast, Benin, and Togo. For a network that was only conducting limited operations in northern and central Mali just a few years ago, this is a significant expansion. JNIM has expanded its arsenal from small arms weapons, pistols, and AKs to larger weapons, including mortars, landmines, and rockets. Those larger weapons and remote improvised explosive devices seem to be JNIM's preferred weapons, as they are used in roughly 16% of attacks, compared to less than 3% by other groups. There has been a recent shift in JNIM's violence in Burkina Faso from selectively targeting military and security forces to more frequent performative violence. This has been seen in successive suicide bombing campaigns and increases in the amount of mass atrocities against communities it perceives as being pro-government. To fund this campaign of mass terror, JNIM has been involved as a major force in the black market, though operating more as an enabler rather than a direct participant. The group is careful to avoid direct association with criminals such as bandits, thieves, and carjackers in areas it seeks to govern. This indirect role allows JNIM to benefit financially without impacting its local reputation. For example, instead of directly engaging in petty theft themselves against the people who live within their conquered territory, JNIM will loot areas in which people have evacuated due to conflict, or loot places that are controlled by opposing forces, such as areas controlled by the VDP or La Volontaire pour la Défense de la Patrie militias. This perceived distance between the organization and petty theft helps JNIM maintain a degree of legitimacy among local populations while still financially benefiting from their operations. Of the black markets JNIM facilitates, one of its most profitable is smuggling, which mainly occurs in Burkina Faso, particularly along the southern border with the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Togo, and Benin. The goods include cheap fuel from Nigeria, which enters the region via Togo, along with drugs and cigarettes from Central Africa. JNIM also receives bribes of cheap fuel, cigarettes, and cash in exchange for smugglers getting safe passage. These smugglers also point out border posts for JNIM to attack, helping the jihadists accomplish their mission of tearing down the state, while the smugglers benefit by having less border patrols to catch them. Over time, this relationship has become symbiotic, where the smugglers and JNIM now rely on each other to help in accomplishing each of their individual goals. This relationship provides JNIM with steady supplies of goods, strong links with local communities, and cheap fuel for those communities. Another black market JNIM facilitates is artisanal gold mining, an important source of revenue and a critical means for local acceptance. After militants kick out the government and local authorities, they give more freedom to artisanal miners in exchange for a small cut of profits. JNIM then relies on pre-existing smuggling systems to then sell the gold, usually ending up in Dubai. JNIM will then use all of what has gained from raids and thefts to win over new fighters and disaffected experienced fighters from other warlords. This usually entails offering the equivalent of a militant signing bonus, like guns, motorbikes, bicycles, and cash to young men, drawing them into their ranks. Overall, the situation is bleak for the region. France's 8-year-long Operation Barkhane successfully eliminated commanders but failed to stop the growth of JNIM. And now that Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger left ECOWAS in 2024, kicking France out the year before, militancy has been on a near unstoppable rise. Although JNIM had previously signaled a willingness to negotiate with the Malian government in exchange for French withdrawal, now that the French are out, the jihadists don't seem to give much thought to negotiations. Attempts to slow down JNIM by Russian mercenaries who arrived after Mali's 2021 coup have largely only succeeded in protecting its capital city of Bamako, while at the same time pushing every other region into the arms of the jihadists. And with Russian resources being drained on its invasion of Ukraine, Mali and Burkina Faso may be seen as an afterthought by the Kremlin at a time when they need the most help. Even though JNIM is certainly a strong actor in West Africa, acquiring resources, funding, and support necessary to win battles on the outskirts of the country, it seems to be purposefully avoiding the mistakes of the past in trying to overthrow the central government before it has a strong hold over its base. The last thing JNIM wants is another international intervention that'll push its progress back another decade, as occurred in 2014. But there may be another reason why JNIM has not overthrown the central government in Mali or Burkina Faso. Plain and simple, the jihadists may not even have the ability to do so yet, seeing the capital cities as simply too hard to take and hold. It seems as though the strategy for JNIM will be to expand its base in the periphery of the sub-Sahel region in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali until it can't expand anymore, then take the capitals. Evidence to support my theory occurred while I was writing this script. On July 1st, an attack took place near the city of Kayes, just 96 kilometers or 60 miles from the Senegalese border, marking it the furthest west JNIM has ever attacked, and far from its main stronghold in territory east of Mali's capital along the Mali-Burkina Faso-Niger border region. More attacks have been taking place in those western regions of Mali recently, and it seems like one of the next locations to consolidate gains. I also expect many of JNIM's funding strategies will continue to be in use to ensure that it can extract as many resources, weapons, and support as possible. Now I understand that this has been a longer video than usual, but I have a couple of small announcements to make. First, if you are interested in learning more about JNIM, feel free to check the description of this video where you can find a doc containing links to all the resources I used for my research. Second, I would like to make a couple of shoutouts. These go to Critical Threat for making the detailed maps I used throughout the video, and Charlie Webb on Twitter, who has been doing a lot of research on the sub-Saharan region in general and JNIM in specific. Charlie has been posting much of the raw footage I used in this video, so big thanks to him. I would also like to thank you all for watching this video. Every new video I make, I try to add new features, and although this one took a little while, I'm very happy with how it turned out. I already have a script written for my next video, so if you're interested in learning about topics like this, feel free to subscribe and stay curious.